Okay, folks, it's time for my third and final posting for Memorial Day. I know you're thrilled at that word final, but thanks for putting up with me. This song I want to do is one I wrote last year, entitled It Took Far Too Long. I performed it for the first time on my radio show on National Vietnam War Veterans Day, which occurs towards the end of March. And I know that we all recall that war, that who were living then and old enough to remember. And yeah, that kerchief's getting really bad. I see that. You know, I've seen more than one post today about the Vietnam War, a couple of photographs of the wall, the memorial wall in Washington with all the names of well over 50,000 soldiers who died in Vietnam. And I saw one picture of the wall today posted that had the name of one of my high school classmates. There was another one I didn't see today, but which I remember and will always remember. He was actually a few years older than me, but another Isaac Litton alum, someone I admired and looked up to greatly, a great football player and outstanding person and man, and his name was Aubrey Jacobs. And Richard Lampkin, if you're watching, you remember that night as vividly and as indelibly as I do. You were at my house that night. We got the news that Aubrey had been killed in Vietnam. And Richard was much closer to Aubrey, being a lot older than me like Aubrey was. And it was a heartbreaking evening. I'll never forget it. I didn't suffer the grief Richard did, but I did feel the grief and just felt the utter shock of the whole thing. Knowing this person and admiring him and looking up to him and knowing they had lost their life in Southeast Asia. But all of us who were around then and can remember know it was not our country's finest hour. Here's the constructive criticism. The way we treated our returning Vietnam veterans and the way we treated for many years those who had lost their lives there, who had given their all, is not something we can be proud of. So this song was written not to scold us, dig up shame and put us down as a nation, but to encourage us to never let that happen again. And I'm confident it won't. We're far too great a people, far too great a nation to ever repeat that mistake. And I pray God's forgiven all of us for the abysmal treatment we gave our veterans then, but we're making up for it. We've made up for it in many, many ways, and we continue to make up for it, and this song is just one more small effort towards that. It took far too long. Way back in the 60s, we began sending men to Southeast Asia to fight once again. But unlike our soldiers who had fought wars before, gratitude and honor were just not in store. Well, today we sing praises to our Vietnam vets. We're grateful for their service, we promise not to forget. Now we honor their valor, we admire how brave and strong they were to fight such battles, but it took far too long. Yes, it took far too long to treat these men right. It took far too long to find out if they're alright. So we must keep it up before they're all gone, 'cause finally they're heroes, but it took far too long. For those who made it back, there was no welcome home. We couldn't have made them feel more alone. There were no parades, there were no marching band. There was no one there to even shake their hand. And we ignored those who died for so long. Oh, such a shame. But now there's a marvelous wall that bears all their names. It brings honor to them and soothes grieving undergone for all those who loved them, but it took far too long. Yes, it took far too long to treat these men right. It took far too long to find out if they're alright. So we must keep it up before they're all gone, 'cause finally they're heroes, but it took far too long. Now some may be asking, what's the purpose of this tune? The past is the past, why dredge up old wounds? And if all is forgiven, why all this relive? Because the reason for this tune is not to blame but to give. Yes, to give us some insight from our history of how blindly we can act and how wrong we can be. And that is the reason I'm singing this song. So never again will it take far too long. Yes, it took far too long to treat these men right. It took far too long to find out if they're alright. Now we must keep it up before they're all gone, 'cause finally they're heroes, but it took far too long. Yes, finally they're heroes, but it took far too long. God bless you all.